Now we're going to look at how to embroider vines and leaves onto the felt heart. I'm going to be using the laser etched pattern here, but if you don't want to use this design, you can just flip your heart over and draw your own vines on with a pencil. I like to start by doing the main central vines with 6 strands of floss, and then I add the leaves with 4 strands so that the central stems are a little bit thicker and stand out. I'm going to start off by using stem stitch, and I'll also demo back stitch, but you can use any stitch you like. I really suggest that you use the extra piece of felt in your kit to try out different stitches, because this gives you a chance to practice the stitches and also decide which stitches you enjoy doing, because some stitches you might like the look of, but they might drive you crazy. I tend to go through phases with stitches where I've got a favorite that I want to use for everything, and at the moment it's stem, so let's get started with that. To start stem, you take one small stitch, and then you bring the needle back up at the bottom of your first stitch, and then you make a longer stitch going on top of it. But this time, don't pull the thread taut quite yet. You want to keep that loop there. And while the loop is still there, bring your needle up in the middle of the stitch where you've just made, which is at the top of that first back stitch. And you notice how I'm bringing the needle up on the left side of the loop. For stem stitch, you always bring it up to the left. If you bring it up to the right, it's actually called outline stitch. It doesn't really matter which side you choose. I think stem stitch has a bit more of a tight rope effect, but it is, generally you pick one side and stick to it. If you do find that you get a little bit mixed up, or you have a really curvy line, sometimes I do switch between the two, and don't worry about that, because when you step back from the ornament, you won't notice that from a distance. You'll just see that nice dark blue line. And then you just keep going, making loops and bringing your needle up in the middle of your loop to create those stitches. And when you get to the end of the line, you also want to end by just having a short stitch at the very end. Starting and ending your stem stitch with shorter stitches is nice because it means that you always have 2 layers of stitches on top of another, so you have the same thickness of line all the way through. If you don't have those small stitches at the top and bottom, it still works. You just get a little bit of a tapered line at the beginning and end of your vine, which can also look really nice. Now we're going to try a few more vines and we'll try out backstitch. Backstitch is called backstitch because you work backwards. You really just bring your needle up away from your stitch and then you bring it back down into the end of your last stitch. So you bring it up and then you put it back down, connecting it to your line. Backstitch is a really useful stitch for making straight lines. Here again I'm using 6 strands of thread, and it's quite a quick stitch as well, so yeah, it's a great one for lines and vines. Then when you finish your vines, you want to finish off your threads on the back before starting with your leaves. Then you bring your leaves back and just arrange a couple of them at a time. They will sort of stick to the felt. You can also use pins, tape, or clamps if you've got them. But if you just do, 1 or 2 leaves at a time, then they generally stick to the felt, which is kind of handy. To attach the leaf, I bring up my needle close to the central stem, sometimes even in between 2 of the stitches if it's a stem stitch. And then I like to take a little bit of an anchor stitch just into the blue felt, just to get it started, but you can also stitch directly into the leaves. It's completely up to you. And then you just keep working your way up the middle of the leaf. If you wanted to, some of these leaves have a couple different points on them. So this leaf, for example, has 3 points. If you wanted to, you could have a stitch going up the middle of the leaf and then a few little stitches on either side. In between leaves, I tend to go onto the back and just do a couple whip stitches through the back threads just to anchor that leaf stitch, and then move on to the next leaf by traveling the thread on the back where you can't see it. And then you just keep on adding leaves along the vines. You can also switch it up and use different stitches for the leaves if you like. You could use stem stitch for the middle bit and then back stitch to attach the leaves, or any stitches you like really. Once you've got all the leaves stitched on, then you're ready for the next step, which is to add those flowers and beads.